Hi there guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Suze Nethercutt. I am a long-time professional artist and more recently doing my Masters in Visual Art, which is what this vlog is all about. So you can see me here settling in on my front veranda. I'm planning on drawing this apple tree in my front yard, which is a gorgeous old specimen, because I have had this project on the go, which you may have seen in my last video, and if you haven't, I'll link that above here so you can find it, where I am turning this antique settee into a painting substrate. I recently learned that this couch is made with a mixture of mahogany, pear and apple woods. And so when I was choosing a tree to paint on it, I really wanted it to be a tree that was familiar to me and that I'm intimate with in my own space. So I chose this apple tree and spent a glorious afternoon in my front garden on my veranda drawing it. As you can see, this apple tree is a beautiful gnarly specimen. I'm not sure how old it is, but it is quite large in the trunk. And I live in a house that is from the 1860s. So there's a lot of significant trees on our property that are quite old. So I really wanted to spend some time with the tree. This has been a big theme throughout my masters. One of the focuses is the idea of spiritual connection to nature and how we can build that through art practice. So I've been spending a lot of time in the last few months in particular drawing trees that are in my sphere, whether they be at my home, whether they be trees that I encounter, such as I did recently on an artist residency where I drew some beautiful old eucalypts there. And also I've recently spent a lot of time drawing the trees I grew up with that I planted with my parents on their family property over 30 years ago. So it was only a matter of time before I sat down to make a sketch of this beautiful old apple tree. And I was quite delighted when I did discover that some of the wood in the settee that I'm intending to paint this on is apple, because I really want this settee to be anchored in artwork made from nature that I feel that spiritual connection to. And as my children have grown up in this garden, we have picked apples from this tree. We spend a lot of time as a family on our beautiful front veranda. So I really wanted to be able to capture this one. I'm doing this drawing in March, which is autumn in Australia and is a particularly beautiful time of year in the town that I live in Ballarat. It is always the most perfect weather, the light is always golden, and I do frequently come out here and spend a lot of time making art in the autumn months. The front veranda is not far at all from my home studio, which is in the middle of our house. I have a couple of studios at the moment. I'm really fortunate to have a space at home, but also have a space at my university where I'm doing my masters. For today's video, I'm working in the home studio. So I'm about to head in there and show you how the progress is going with the settee, and I'll fill you in on all the steps of how I'm creating art on it. You can see me here just cutting out the shape of the tree, which I traced from the back upholstery of this couch, which I'm intending to paint the tree on. And I'm just going to pin it on there so that I can get a real sense for how the tree is going to look. If you saw my last video, you would note that this is a different tree to the one that I had previously played around with. Which you can see here is the bottom, the root component that is on the bottom of that painting. And I changed that tree for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because the first tree that I drew was blackwood, which was used really commonly for colonial furniture in Australia. But on reflection, I realised after I'd done that mock-up that I really wanted the tree that I painted on this couch to reflect the wood that it was made out of. So that was why I ended up going with the apple tree. Now you can see me here. I've taken a photo of that sketch that's on the couch because I've realized after putting it up there that I'm not 100% happy with the composition of the tree and I want to alter it a little bit. I realized that the trunk that comes out from the front is incredibly vertical and it was a little bit too much so. So I've decided that I'm going to slightly alter my sketch to change the lines of the trunks of the trees just so that they work a little bit better as a composition. Now I could have just sat down and re-sketched the whole thing out on paper as I did the first sketch, but because I really only wanted to change a few lines of the tree, I decided that an easier way to do it would be just to pin some more of the paper up there, project the drawing that I'd already done of the tree onto the paper and tracing off those lines and then making the alterations from those. I use a projector quite a lot in my practice at the moment. It's not something I've always used, but I have been using it a lot more of late. And I find it really useful, particularly just for time saving. You can spend a lot of time doing preparatory sketches and each of them takes such a long time to do. And one of my main problems in life as a mum of two, doing my masters and also with a professional art practice is time. So I really do like the way that the projector enables me to save time. I do combine it with drawing, however. What my practice is to try and work from projections that are from drawings. So I have in the past worked a bit with projections made from photographs, but I have found that the eventual artwork that comes out of them just isn't quite right and doesn't really capture my hand and my unique mark making. So I found it that if I project sketches that I've made, that I get a much better end result. So you can see me there, I've just pinned up a piece of paper and I'm sketching the outlines of that tree, that sketch that I made, and I'm just changing the orientation of the branches slightly so that they are a little bit more pleasing. I'm constantly covering the projection, going in and out of the picture to make sure that I've captured all the lines that I need. And then I'm taking that line sketch back over to my desk and I'm just working it up with my line work as a drawing because I will actually use a photograph of this sketch to project to do the final painting on the settee. You've seen me work with a couple of different pencils that are my favourites. One is the Kaweco Sport mechanical pencil, which has a really fat lead, and the other is the Blackwing Matte, and they are my two favourite pencils at the moment. You can see me now, I'm working up the second half of the artwork for this couch, which is the root system that I am painting on the seat upholstery. Now I'm working with some references that I found online for this because you can't always see the roots under the trees in your own garden. And the root system is actually symbolically the really pivotal piece of this artwork, because I really want the root systems to come out and feed into the timber at the sides of the couch. Roots is one of the major themes that is evolving in the theoretical part of my masters. You can see me here, I'm working with white charcoal to trace that image onto the upholstery. If you want to know more about how I prepared the upholstery of this settee and turned it into this linen look, then just go and have a look at my previous video, which is the What Happened After My Artist Residency video. I'll link it up here above so you can find it, where I show you how I prepared the surface. But once I have this surface painted, what I've used is chalk paint, which is a very different kind of paint. A lot of people use it for painting timber and other furniture items, but you can use it to stain fabric as well. So I've used that method to create this linen look background, and I have traced on my tree in my white charcoal, so I've got a background to work with, and now I am preparing to paint the tree onto the couch. So when I say paint, I'm using that term rather lightly because what I'm actually doing is watering down the chalk paint that I'm using. I chose to use Annie Sloan chalk paint. I had a long discussion with a lady at my local hardware store as to why I needed to get the Annie Sloan paint rather than another brand of chalk paint that I was looking at, because in Australia apparently they changed the recipe of the paint so that it doesn't quite do what it's meant to do in the way that I'm using it and doesn't like to be watered down. So that was the reason I chose Annie Sloan. This isn't sponsored, it just was what was recommended to me. So I water down this chalk paint and paint it onto the surface of the upholstery that I've already prepared with the same paint that was also watered down. And what it becomes is this very absorbent surface. The best way I've heard it described as what it's like to paint with in terms of a fine art medium is it's quite similar to fresco. Frescoes are paintings on plaster that are painted when the plaster's a little bit damp and wet and when it's very absorbent. So the pigment sinks right back into the surface of the ground that you have there, and it can take a bit of building up of layers to get the effect that you want. So this method is quite similar in that way, in that I would water down the paint, paint it on, and within a few minutes the pigment will have sunk right back into the cloth. And then I am slowly building up the three-dimensionality and the different tones in the image as I go along, which you'll see coming up. But you want to use the paint when it's watered down because that is what prevents it from actually feeling like dried paint on fabric. If you've ever painted on fabric with regular acrylic paint or something similar, you will have noticed that it actually goes quite crispy and rough and is not pleasant at all to have on the skin, which is not what you want for furniture if you want it still to be sat on. So in preparing this couch, I actually did several layers of the watered down paint, sanding in between to maintain the softness. And I'll do the same also with this layer of the painting. I'm keeping it nice and watery so that it's not going to go crispy. And you can see I'm gradually filling in the lines of that apple tree, that I'm building up the tone to get a three-dimensionality happening. You can see how I've changed the lines of that sketch, so there's a little bit more curve in the branches and feels a little bit more pleasing to the eye to me, and also I think has a better relationship with the curves in the furniture itself. It did take me several hours to do this painting on this couch, which wasn't entirely comfortable for my body. If I'd thought it through, I probably would have moved it to a table, but I was at home this day and had no one to help me, so I just made sure I did some really good stretches after. I like to keep a TheraBand in the studio, which is like this big elastic band that gets used in physiotherapy a bit, and just like to do roll downs on it and just a few exercises with my arms and shoulders to loosen up, particularly if I've been in a weird position painting for a while. The next day, once that layer was dry, I went back in with some wet Q-tips just to clean up some of the white lines from the white charcoal. I suggest doing this step a little bit ahead of when you intend to paint on it again, because you will be moistening the surface and the colour can bleed if you go in and paint onto it immediately after doing it. So I did this step first, got rid of all of those lines and gave myself plenty of time for it to dry before I went back in there. And while I was waiting for it to dry, it was time to progress onto painting those roots onto the seat upholstery of the couch. Now, the seat upholstery was quite damaged when I painted it. You can probably see a few of those marks in the fabric that are a bit uneven. So I had to put a bit more paint on the surface of this when I was preparing the ground, and it did get a bit hard. So you can see I did a bit of sanding and that softened it up beautifully. I cleaned up some of that sanding with a wet wipe, and then I progressed on to drawing the roots onto the seat of the couch with my white charcoal. This was quite a lengthy process because the seat obviously is the biggest part of the upholstery to paint on. And I was working with a variety of different references when I was painting the roots. I found quite a few different references online of root systems. I looked specifically at the root systems of apple trees. And I kind of combined and melded together a few different images to get a realistic take on what the roots would look like, and started to draw them on. Now, as I explained before, what I really wanted to do to bring home the symbolic meaning of this couch was feed the root system into those pieces of timber that you can see on the sides that feed out of the couch from where the upholstery is. The whole idea of that is really to make the viewer think about how a piece of furniture is actually made from a tree. The life of a tree is actually sacrificed in order to make furniture. And in the Victorian period and all of those periods that came before from the British Empire and other parts of Europe, so many trees were cut down for the purpose of making absolutely gorgeous furniture. But I think we often lose contact with that fact in our modern society, the impact on a tree to make a piece of furniture. So part of what my master's is about, there's a whole historical focus on a woman called Louisa Ann Meredith, who was an artist and writer and lived in Tasmania. She was a Victorian woman, and she would have spent a lot of time sitting down in her parlour, probably sewing her family's clothes, writing her books by hand on this very elaborate furniture that she would have brought with her from England. Some of it may have actually have been made from trees from Tasmania. But the presence of women in drawing rooms and parlours in the Victorian period, so much of their lives took place in there, and so much of their creativity took place in there. So I really wanted to bring furniture into the story that I'm telling in my master's as it relates to this historical subject. And I also wanted to really bring home the impact of imperialism and the spreading of an empire throughout the world, such as what the British Empire did in the 18th and 19th centuries. Very much the focus of that was to go in and take the resources of the countries that they took over for industry. So that's very much what this piece is about, amongst other things. So you can see me here, I'm painting onto the upholstery. I've used the same method that I used with the tree, in that I am simply going in with the watered down paint and painting into the roots and getting that first layer down first. And I'm feeding some of those roots into the side timber of the couch, so you get a real sense of how the energy of this tree was used in the making of this piece, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the timbers used in this piece was likely to have been applewood. I asked a friend of mine who is a master furniture maker. He said he could see some of the timber looked like on that back piece to be mahogany. They also looked to be pearwood and applewood in this piece of furniture. So I feel like painting this apple tree on here is absolutely perfect. It reminds me every time I look at it that that beautiful old tree in my front yard is only there because no one cut it down to use it for something else, and that we really need to think about what we're doing to the trees on this planet and preserve their beauty and their majesty, especially when they reach their ripe old age and become large, significant trees. They're so special. I absolutely love connecting with them at my home, and I'm glad this piece reminds me of that fact. You can see me here just filling in some of the final details and getting the modeling of this apple tree happening. I've got in some really dark bits there, and now it's starting to look like the couch that I had in my mind all along. As I come back here, you can see the surrounding artwork that has been taking place that I intend to hang quite close to this couch in an installation in my final exhibition for my masters. A big part of doing a master's by research is I'm constantly bouncing backwards and forwards from art making to thinking about how I'm going to write up the theoretical and research aspects of my master's, because it is assessed partly by exhibition of final artworks and also partly by exegesis, which is just another name for a smaller thesis. So you can see here a board that I created in the last video, where I went through and printed off little thumbnail photographs of the artwork that I've made so far throughout my masters, which has been quite varied and different, and started to put them up to see where I could see different themes emerging and group them together so that I could see patterns in my research as I have made artwork. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting down with my research journals. I talked about this a bit last time. I have sets of research journals that I keep in different leather covers that are for different purposes. And if you'd like to learn more about how I make those leather covers, I have a little e-course that I created recently on how to make your own leather journal covers for sketchbooks and also research journals as I use them, and I show you my own collection of research journals. So if you'd like to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description. But you can see me here leafing through my main research journal, where I keep photographs of artwork that I've made or experiences that I've had throughout the duration of my masters that are informing the artwork that I'm making. And I'm basically writing the narrative of what has happened throughout my masters so far, the artwork that I've made, the experiences I've had, how one work has led to another, the kinds of insights that I've had, because I think that what I really want to do is form the exegesis around that narrative, that personal experience of unfolding that I've been having, making the artworks that I'm making and the insights that I've been having, which is a really common way to structure a visual art exegesis. So you can see me here, I'm just starting to get some words onto the paper and writing about that. I've always found writing about my art to be quite difficult, and part of what I've really loved about doing the masters is the training and support that I'm having in that process of writing about my art, but also its context in the existing art world. When I am working in the studio, particularly if I'm writing, I love to burn candles and essential oil. One of my favorites for concentration is myrtle. So I'm just putting on some myrtle here in the studio so that I can enliven my brain with the smell of it and really get the creative juices flowing. So having this board up in front of me, showing me all of the different works that I've made and writing about the narrative of my experience was super, super helpful. I had a supervision meeting coming up in a couple of days after this video was shot. So I really wanted to have something written down that I could take to my supervisors and talk through so that I can be making some very clear decisions about creating a framework and an outline for my exegesis. I realized the next day that I was finding it really hard to visualize this current body of artwork with pieces from a previous body of artwork hanging up so closely to it. So these artworks were from my exhibition at the Art Gallery of Ballarat in 2024, just prior to starting my master's. There's a few leftover pieces. It was called An Ornamental Education, and I'll link a video up above if you want to have a look at that exhibition from a while back. So I moved those artworks away so that they are not in with this current lot of artwork. And I also wanted to take a photograph or two of the artwork that I've been making that I envisage will become part of this installation that is coming into my mind as I am creating the works. So I expanded my nails in my backboard that you can see there that I can use just for putting nails in and putting canvases up on as I'm working, so that I could start to lay them out a bit more like how I envisage them looking in the exhibition. I also decided that even though I don't think the painting on the settee is completely done at this stage, that I would remove the tape because I really wanted to get a sense for how it was looking without the green tape on there, which I found quite distracting. So I did the very satisfying task of removing the painter's tape from the couch. I also just didn't want to leave it on there too long because sometimes it can interfere with the varnish on the furniture, so it felt good to get rid of that. And it also really gave me a sense for just the finishing touches that I think it's going to need when I complete it, which I don't think will be too messy, so I felt okay about taking it off. There were a couple of bits that bled through, but fortunately they were pretty easy to scrape off with my thumbnail. So I'm really, really pleased with how it's looking so far. And if you were here for the last video, you would have seen me working on the canvases that are stacked with the two tall gum trees. And I have a preparatory sketch that I did and some photographs that are the models for some of those bark samples that you can see the paintings for those to the right. I had them all pinned up there for inspiration as I was working, but I wanted to remove them just to take these progress photos. So I took all of that away, made a few minor adjustments with the pieces that I think could remain there, constantly moving backwards and forwards to get a sense for what would work for the larger composition for this grouping of objects. And I'm really starting now to get a feel for what this is going to look like in the exhibition. But that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks so much for being here. If you've stayed to the end, why don't you give me an emoji of a chair, since this one was all about furniture. And if you're not subscribed already, please make sure you like and subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think. What are some of the more interesting things you've made in your own practice? I'd love to hear about it. And I will catch you next time. Bye. I just de-taped the couch.
Oh.
Looks beautiful.
Do you want to come look?
Yeah.
That looks awesome.
Doesn't it look great?
Yeah. That look great, Suki.